Long before the birth of Christ, midwinter had always been a time for merrymaking by the masses. The root of the midwinter rituals was the winter solstice, the shortest day, which falls on the 21st of December. After this day, the days lengthen, and the return of spring, the season of life, was eagerly anticipated. It was therefore a time to celebrate both the end of the autumn sowing and the fact that the life-giving sun had not deserted them. Bonfires were lit to help strengthen the unconquered sun. For Christians the world over, this period celebrates the story of the birth of Jesus in a manger in Bethlehem. The scriptures, however, make no mention as to the time of year, yet alone the actual date of the Nativity. Even our current calendar, which supposedly calculates the years from the birth of Christ, was drawn up in the 6th century by Dionysius, an innumerate Italian monk, to correspond with the Roman festival. The 25th of December. Until the 4th century, Christmas could be celebrated throughout Europe, anywhere between early January through to late September. It was Pope Julius I who happened upon the bright idea of adopting the 25th of December as the actual date of the Nativity. The choice appears both logical and shrewd, blurring religion with existing feast days and celebrations. Any merrymaking could now be attributed to the birth of Christ rather than any ancient pagan ritual. The 12 days of Christmas. People really did celebrate Christmas for 12 days, sometimes longer. The traditional English Christmas has its origins in the 9th century, when King Alfred the Great enshrined in law the importance of keeping the church's feasts. He commanded that there should be a holiday on Christmas Day and the 12 days that followed it, for it was believed that the Magi, the 3 wise men, had journeyed for 12 days to see the infant Jesus. During this period of 12 days, no free man could be compelled to work. The common man enjoyed this right to the best of his ability during the Tudor period, while kings and nobles indulged themselves in abundance on a lordly scale. The 12 days of Christmas would have been a most welcome break for the workers on the land, which in Tudor times would have been the majority of the people. All work, except for looking after the animals, would stop, restarting on Plough Monday, the first Monday after Twelfth night. On Plough Monday, the 12 days were officially over, and peasants returned to their toil. It was customary for the communal plough to be blessed and then dragged door to door by the men of the village to collect funds for the parish. Those who refused to make a donation had the ground outside their door ploughed up. The practice was banned under Edward VI. Festive cake was eaten on Twelfth night, not Christmas Day, for the sumptuous feast that marked Twelfth night. An enormous cake was traditionally baked, containing dried fruit, flour, honey and spices. Inside the cake were a bean or coin and a pea. Slices were offered to guests as they arrived, men and women taking from the right and left respectively. The lucky man and woman who found the bean and the pea would be the king and queen of the bean or pea for the evening, and would then lead the singing, dancing and disports. While at court, the lucky recipients were often selected in advance. Sadly, no recipe for 12th night cake survives from before 1803. The Yule log. The burning of the Yule log is thought to derive from the midwinter ritual of the early Viking invaders, who built enormous bonfires to celebrate their festival of lights. The word Yule has existed in the English language for many centuries as an alternative term for Christmas. Traditionally, a large log would be selected in the forest on Christmas Eve, decorated with ribbons, dragged home and laid upon the hearth. After lighting, it was kept burning throughout the 12 days of Christmas. It was considered lucky to keep some of the charred remains to kindle the log of the following year. Christmas food. There was no partying before Christmas. People fasted until Christmas Eve. For the Tudors, the 40 days before Christmas, sometimes known as Advent, was a season of atonement in which good Christians prepared themselves spiritually for the coming of Christ. The devout were supposed to do penance and fast, avoiding meat, cheese and eggs. The feasting would begin on Christmas Day, for which great preparations had been ongoing throughout the fast, and would have been doubly appreciated after the restricted fare of Advent. During the 12 days, people would visit their neighbours, sharing and enjoying the traditional mince pie. The pies would have included prunes, raisins, dates, powdered beef, butter, egg yolk, flour, suet or marrow, and minced mutton, and seasoned with salt, pepper, saffron, and a little chopped mutton in remembrance of the shepherds. A total of 13 ingredients representing Christ and his apostles, while the loaf-like shape echoed the crib of the infant Jesus, and was sometimes adorned with an image of the babe in pastry. Plum pudding was eaten before Christmas dinner, much enjoyed as an appetizer to line the stomach before the rich dinner to come. It was a thick broth of mutton or beef boiled in a skin with plums, spices, dried fruits, breadcrumbs and wine. In the later 16th century, flour was added to make a pudding or cake. Centuries later, the Victorians would remove the meat and turn plum porridge into rich Christmas pudding we know today, served as a dessert. Turkey had become a popular Christmas dish by the end of the Tudor period. There is a record of the first turkey arriving in England from the New World in 1526, and it was soon prized for its flavour. Henry VIII is said to have been the first to eat it as part of a Christmas feast. Turkey had been added to the repertoire of popular Christmas dishes by the end of the Tudor period, sometimes served instead of peacock or swan, although it would be centuries before it fully ousted them or the traditional meats. A Tudor Christmas pie consisted of a turkey stuffed with a goose, stuffed with a chicken, stuffed with a partridge, stuffed with a pigeon. All of this was put in a pastry case called a coffin and was served surrounded by jointed hare, small game birds and wild fowl. For Christmas dinner, all social classes enjoyed the seasonal favourite brawn, a dish made from the head of a pig or cow. In wealthy households, the first course was traditionally a boar's head that had been boned and stuffed with forcemeat, a mixture of ground lean meat, smeared with mustard, dressed in herbs and fruits, with a roasted apple in its mouth, and garnished with gilded rosemary, bay leaves, spices, fruits, or a sprig of yew, whitened with egg or flour to make it look as though it had been dusted with snow. The presentation of the boar's head comes from the medieval period and is rooted in pre-Christian tradition, but came to signify Christ's triumph over sin, the wild boar being a subject of fear to rural folk and more than worthy quarry for hunters. The dish would be ceremoniously carried in, resplendent in its platter, by the steward. Christmas carols. Whether the word carol comes from the Latin carola or the French carole, its original meaning is the same, a dance with a song. The dance element appears to have disappeared over the centuries, but the song was used to convey stories, normally of the Nativity. The earliest recorded published collection of carols is in 1521 by Wynkyn de Worde, which included the Boar's Head Carol. Carols flourished throughout the Tudor time as a way to celebrate Christmas and to spread the story of the Nativity. Celebrations come to an abrupt end, however, in the 17th century, when the Puritans banned all festivities, including Christmas itself. Surprisingly, carols remained virtually extinct until the Victorians reinstated the concept of an Old English Christmas drink, and to wash it all down, a drink from the Wassail bowl. The word wassail derives from the Anglo-Saxon wassail, meaning to be whole or to be of good health. The bowl, a large wooden container holding as much as a gallon of punch, made of hot ale, sugar, spices and apples. This punch was to be shared with friends and neighbours. A crust of bread was placed at the bottom of the wassail bowl and offered to the most important person in the room, hence today's toast as part of any drinking ceremony, with a commoner or courtier. Singing and call and response were a big part of the wassail bowl ritual. Father Christmas. The tradition of Christmas being personified by one person, such as a Father Christmas or Santa Claus, was well established by the Tudor period. The Saxons welcomed winter into the guise of King Winter or Father Time, while in Norse tradition the god Woden, who was known as Yule Father, left gifts of bread and much goodwill during Yule. In great households of the Tudor period, the 12 days of feasting, banqueting, pantry and merrymaking were resided over by a person called the Lord of Misrule. There was also sometimes a Pacific character called Captain Christmas or Prince Christmas, whose role was to ensure that everybody made merry at Yuletide. A favourite character in Tudor folk plays was called Father Christmas. Clad in green and wearing a grotesque mask and a wig, he would rampage about, shouting and brandishing a great club. The Feast of Fools. At Yuletide, social barriers came tumbling down and roles were reversed, leading to much festive licence throughout Britain. The Christmas period was a time of liberty, relaxation and subverting the rules. For a few days, status took second place to revelry, with role reversal amongst the hierarchical ranks of society and between the sexes. In 1564, for example, Mary Queen of Scots abdicated so that 2 of her 4 maids, who were all called Mary, could share the role of Queen of the Bean. At the same time, festive licence served to underline the normal roles of those who participated. No one forgot who was really master and who was servant. In Scotland, the 12 days of Christmas were called the Daft Days. On such blurring, many involve the Feast of Fools, presided over by the Lord of Misrule. The feast was an unruly event, involving much drinking, revelry and role reversal. The Lord of Misrule, normally a commoner with a reputation of knowing how to enjoy himself, was selected to direct the entertainment. The festival is thought to have originated from the benevolent Roman masters who allowed their servants to be the boss for a while. The church entered the act by allowing a choir boy, elected by his peers, to be a bishop during the period, starting with St Nicholas' Day, 6th of December, and to Holy Innocents' Day, 28th of December. Within the period, the chosen boy, symbolising the lowest authority, would dress in full bishop's regalia and conduct the church services. Christmas trees. Most houses were decorated with a kissing bough. While the custom of decorating a Christmas tree was to flourish in Germany, it did not become popular in England until the 19th century. Prior to that, the chief decoration in people's houses was the kissing bough. The bough was sometimes stuck with apples, and always with a sprig of mistletoe. It was typically constructed on a wooden frame and suspended from the ceiling. The first isolated record of an English decorated Christmas tree dates from the 15th century, when a fir tree lit with candles was set up in a London street. The fir tree had long been a Christian symbol, with its evergreen branches representing eternal life. Legend has it that the German reformer Martin Luther invented the Christmas tree, as we know it, on a winter's night in 1536. Luther was walking through a pine forest near his home in Wittenberg, Germany, when he suddenly looked up and saw thousands of stars glittering jewel-like among the branches of the trees. So the story goes. Mistletoe. A wreath or double hoop with roots in early pagan folklore, the kissing bough was woven from mistletoe, ash, hazel or willow, covered in evergreens, and supported an effigy of the baby Jesus in the centre. The medieval and early modern English were infamously kissy, as recorded by travellers from continental Europe, an iconic reversal of modern stereotypes. And visitors would be embraced under the bough as a sign of goodwill, leading to the custom of kissing under the mistletoe. The custom of hanging a ball of mistletoe from the ceiling and exchanging kisses under it as a sign of friendship is an ancient one. The Romans, for example, observed that the Druids of the British Isles used mistletoe in the winter solstice ceremonies and for healing. Despite there being a medieval belief that Christ's cross had been formed from the wood of the mythical mistletoe tree, churches and abbeys have always banned mistletoe, and it is still banned today because of its pagan connections. With one exception, at York Minster a bunch of mistletoe was laid on the altar every Christmas. Christmas presents. Gift giving in the Tudor court took place on New Year's Day. After the king had finished dressing, the fanfare would sound and servants would march in with gifts, with the queen's coming first. To give generously was to curry favour with the king or queen, while refusing them was a brutally effective way of communicating disdain. Christians who decorated the 12 days may give gifts on each of them, with each of the 12 days representing a wish for a corresponding month of the new year. They may feast on traditional foods and otherwise celebrate the entire time through the morning of the solemnity of Epiphany. Contemporary traditions include lighting a candle for each day, singing the verse of a corresponding day for the famous The 12 Days of Christmas, and lighting a Yule log on Christmas Eve and letting it burn some more on each of the 12 nights. For some, the 12th night remains the night of the most festive parties and exchanges of gifts. In his first year as king, in 1509, Henry VIII spent the equivalent of £400,000 on presents. The giving of gifts had been a feature of the Roman Saturnalia, and the custom has survived into the Tudor age. Games at Christmas. When the Thames froze over in 1564, people played football on the ice. Many courtiers shot daily at targets set up on the frozen water, and both men and women went daily on the Thames in greater numbers than any street of London until the ice began to fall on the 3rd of January. Traditionally, New Year's Eve was the occasion for boisterous games such as Hoodman's Blind and various sports. Christmas celebrations for the rich included hunting and outdoor sports. At court and in great houses there would be shuttlecock, skittles and paid entertainers such as acrobats, tumblers and fire eaters, as well as jesters and much tomfoolery. It became a tradition for entertainers and plays to be staged on Twelfth night. At court, masques and pageants were frequently staged on Twelfth night. These were magnificent occasions, with gorgeously dressed lords and ladies mingling with players in fantastic costumes in halls lit by torches and candles. Twelfth night became a traditional time for going to the theatre. The first playhouse opened in 1576 at Shoreditch, its design being based on a galleried inn, and by the end of the century, around 15,000 Londoners were attending the theatres every week. The Christmas Pantomime. Some of these traditions were adapted from the older pagan customs, including the Roman Saturnalia and the Germanic Yuletide. Some also had an echo in modern-day pantomime, where traditionally authority is mocked and the principal male lead is played by a woman, while the leading older female character or dame is played by a man. Ghost stories at Christmas. In Tudor times there was an established tradition of telling ghost stories by the fireside at Christmas, particularly on Christmas Eve. It was a thrilling way to while away the hours on a dark winter's evening. For centuries the belief had lingered that the veil between the two worlds and the next was at its thinnest at the time of year of the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, and that spirits could walk the earth. Bad luck. Some thought it bad luck to leave Christmas decorations up after midnight on Twelfth night, when the power of the Christ child no longer held sway. For if the greenery was to not put outside again, the tree spirits would bring disaster to the household in the coming year. At court, the Yuletide season did not end until the 2nd of February, when the Feast of Candlemas was celebrated. And then again, for most people in Tudor England, the Feast of Epiphany on the 6th of January was the last great day of processions, feasts, festivity and fun. On Plough Monday, the first Monday after Epiphany, people went back to work.
The boar's head, as I understand, is the rarest dish in all the land. When thus be decked with a gay garland, let us serve here a county crow, cock and a pre-death